started. It's here. The transfer portal is officially open. Florida State is looking for a quarterback. I'd wondered if they were going to, now that they have hired Gus Malzahn as the offense coordinator. He will be the play caller for the Noles this next season. And right when I was getting done with my research, and I thought, I wonder if they're going to go and get after this guy named Thomas Castellanos. Sure enough, I see on the 24/7 Noles site that he's going to be visiting Florida State this week. So he will be one of 3 quarterbacks that I discussed. The other 2 will be John Mateer, the red-hot quarterback out of the state of Washington. Right now he's at Washington State, but he's a Texas kid. And then also Caden Salter, another Texas kid, but he's at Liberty by way of the University of Tennessee. All 3 of them, I think, are great players, and if you put them in the right offensive system with the right people, you can be an elite team. The skills for all 3 of them are similar in the sense that they are mobile, they have big arms, and they are proven. So today we're going to start with Thomas Castellanos. Then we're going to go on to Salter, and then we're going to go to Mateer. Note, Salter is also going to visit Florida State this week. I have not heard if Mateer is, but he hasn't officially jumped in the portal, so that's a little more difficult to see, and he might end up being the most prolific guy to go after in terms of all the NIL money. So, number 1 today, I was going to say, does Florida State need a quarterback? I was going to start the show that way. Well, obviously, they think they do if they've got 2 guys visiting. So, really, right in the beginning of this show, I'm just going to say I'm going to skip over that. We're just going to jump into Thomas Castellanos because they believe they do. It's ironic that they're going after him because I used to cover UCF, and I went to see Thomas play in high school. He's a kid I saw playing 7-on-7. I have a lot of dialogue with him, so I want to share a couple of stories about him, go through his stats and his progressions, and why he would be a good fit for what Malzahn prefers to do. Number 1, he's from Waycross, Georgia. It's a program up there in Ware County that it's important for that community to rally around football. Friday nights there, it is lit. That place is crazy. The people get into it. He understands the importance of every single day being the leader of a college football program. That's true. But he was knowing that when he was in high school. That's important to help you move on and be a consistent performer, not just at college, but in everything you do. Being in the spotlight helps you develop as a young man. And I think that's really helped Thomas Castellanos. 2, Florida State, Clemson, Georgia, several schools wanted him out of high school, but they wanted him as an athlete or like receiver, DB, running back. I forget which one it was Florida State wanted him for, but he was ardently recruited. And I saw him play in 7-on-7 before I ever saw him put on the pads at Ware County. And I'll be honest, he was one of the best corners I saw in the country that year. But he was just totally steadfast on playing quarterback. So he ends up going to UCF. Doesn't get a play early. They take a transfer quarterback, and he vamooses, heads to Boston College. His sophomore season, this is a kid that ended up playing right away. And if you remember back, Florida State almost lost to Boston College because Castellanos absolutely tore them apart running and throwing. I remember telling people before that game, I know it's Boston College, but they better not take this game lightly, which Florida State 100% did. And that's why he almost beat them. They didn't have anywhere near the same talent level as the Noles, but he broke contain over and over and hit a couple of big passes. That's what the threat of a mobile quarterback can do, and Castellanos is the best. Now, we get a backdrop of him. This is a yes sir, no sir kid, typical Georgia young man. He will fit in at Florida State, no problem, if that's where he decides to take his talents. With that being stated, the 24/7 Noles site, this is not like saying, hey, he's coming to Florida State. He's going to visit this week, but he is also going to visit other programs. Right now, looks like Vandy and Mizzou. 2 things. Vanderbilt is interesting because if they're going to continue with the same philosophy, and I saw Vandy play Auburn this year, he would be a good fit there. But do they have a lot of NIL and stuff? I don't know. That school's got tons of money, but are they invested in football? I'm curious of what Castellanos thinks. Missouri, on the other hand, just lost a senior quarterback, a graduate student at that, and Cook played there for 3 years as the main guy. They are coming off a season where they didn't meet expectations, but they still went, I think, 9-3. They won a lot of games close. They were ugly in a lot of the ways they won. But whatever their record was, they didn't meet the expectations of their fans, and they had some ugliness to their offense. They were up and down. They want a playmaker, apparently, if they're going with him, because, well, Cook could run. Castellanos is a totally different guy. So I think he would fit in there. That's another blue collar school. I think he would do well there academically, socially. He'd be fine. But there's one huge difference with Missouri compared to Vanderbilt in football. NIL there is enormous. So I think they would end up being, in my opinion, the biggest burden for Florida State to overcome in signing him. Now, as a player, let's just start with the obvious. If Thomas would have decided to have played baseball, he's the guy you could have put at the hot corner at third base because he's got a cannon for an arm. Not a good arm, a cannon. 5'9", 200 pounds, but he is built kind of like a prize fighter. He is absolutely yoked, and he's a kid that just physically, you can see why Georgia, Florida State, Clemson wanted him to come play one of the other skill spots. His biceps are like my legs. He is put together. He really enjoys lifting and working out. He's all into it. I think he will be a fit. Now, statistically, it's been kind of wild what he has had because I'm not really sure why O'Brien, who's the new coach at BC, he just couldn't help himself. And I knew he was going to do this, try to make him more of a pocket passer. He is not a pure pocket passer. He is a move the pocket option RPO guy. Bill doesn't want to run that offense. So the fit was bad. Thomas left after, I believe it was 8 games. Here are the numbers. 99 to 161, 61.5%, 1,366 yards, 8.5 per, 18 and 5, which isn't bad, but there was something there difficult between the two for him to not be happy, and he got benched at one point. I don't know all the specifics again, but it is what it is. Now, here's the other part. Third downs, he was pretty good. 32 of 55, 58.2%, 411 yards, 7.5 per, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. Pretty good. 12 out of 17 on those third downs that you just love to pick up and just annoy a defense, the 4 to 6 yard areas. 12 out of 17, 70.6, 175 yards, 10.3, 2 touchdowns, 10 first downs. So he was a pretty good player. But everything I've ever been told is O'Brien is not the easiest guy to deal with. I remember a famous scene where he was the OC for the Patriots, and him and Tom Brady are just MFing each other. And they got it on tape, like they were just in each other's face. Like it was close to you're going to see a fight as you're ever going to see between a coach and a player. So he's just not, everybody I've heard talked about, he's just not a nice guy. Maybe he rubbed Thomas the wrong way. I have no idea, but he didn't stick around, and now he's back at the portal. But those stats are just part of what he can do. As a runner, they didn't use him properly this year. He ran for like 200-some yards this year. But in 2023, his sack-adjusted yardage is 1,222 yards, 5.9, and 13 touchdowns. RPO, quarterback draw, quarterback counter, quarterback lead, just making guys look stupid in one-on-one scenarios. Like legitimately, he could move to tailback right now and go start at half the schools in the FBS. So if you're going to come after him, you have to break down and make the absolute prototypical perfect tackle, because in space, if he sees you, it's really hard to get a good square shot on Thomas Castellanos. You pretty much have to guess. He is elite twitchy. So I think that's also hindered him in some senses because his footwork is not always consistent as a passer, doesn't always keep his eyes down the field. But when he does, he's got touch. He's really developed on that. When I saw him younger, he didn't have a ton of touch. He didn't throw anything besides a level 1 or level 2 ball all that consistently. Occasionally would, but for the most part, he had a heater, okay? And occasionally he might throw an off-speed pitch, but for the most part, it was the fastball coming 96 mile an hour. Now, the other thing with him, when he leaves the pocket, Thomas is surely a threat to the run to football, but he can throw it on a dime, whether it's a heater or he can lob it, and he will throw across his body. He can change his arm delivery and make a really good throw. That doesn't mean he's nowhere near a finished product, even as an RPO kind of quarterback that fits Malzahn's system. With that being stated, the difference between what Gus wants to do with him and what Bill wants to do with him, there's only one choice between the two that fits Thomas, and that's Gus. Thomas is not a guy that's running an NFL scheme. Like I have no idea why Bill tried to do what he did with him this year. And they ran some RPO and some stuff, but they didn't run him enough. 200 and some yards rushing is just not enough for a guy that is good enough to be your best athlete on the entire team. You can dot the I at Ohio State. He's that kind of athlete. So I also think that you're going to see him take another step with another spring practice, again, wherever he goes, and all the things that he needs. So if Florida State got him and they get him through spring, it would be great because then Luke Kromenhoek wouldn't have to be the guy. At the same time, it doesn't matter who else it is, but no freshman or sophomore should be the guy at Florida State, barring it just being an unbelievable player. This could put things in a good spot because Thomas has one more year, and then he'll probably try to go to the NFL in some capacity is my guess. But I believe he has 2 years of eligibility. I think he redshirted his freshman year technically at UCF. But whatever the case is, I imagine this to be a one-year deal. We'll see. At that point, you take what you get. But Florida State would be getting, quite honestly, about as good a fit on the field, knows the offense already because he knows Gus. A great guy. He would fit into the Florida State culture around this town. The area where he's from is not a whole lot different than the panhandle of Florida. So I think this would be about as close to a home run for what Florida State could get for a year. Now, the first question everybody's going to say is, could we really win with them next year? Yes. Now, I still understand that the offensive line and all that stuff needs to get better, but Thomas Castellanos, if he can help Boston College almost beat the 2023 version of Florida State with Boston College's skill talent, imagine what he's going to be able to do with guys like Cam Davis behind him. I mean, that's a completely different world. Like if Rodell comes back, etc. Florida State's running back room is going to be really good. The receiver room, we'll see. They've got some talent, some young guys they got to develop, but they at least got a chance. But we know at tight end, they're legit. Hopefully, if the O-line can even be average, Florida State could have a pretty productive offense, and that would be fun to cover.